23rd of July. Like sands through the hourglass, 2023 is going too fast. Today I'm with Western Cape Provincial Secretary of the South African Communist Party, BENSON NGQENTSU, to talk about the reconfiguration, the revitalization of the Tri-Partite alliance. That is the relationship between the ANC, the SACP and COSATU. Also, Shaun August facing a police investigation for making claims on his enabling allowance when he was a member of the provincial legislature. Further afield in France, that nation faces its George Floyd moment as thousands arrested after unrest after a police officer needlessly kills a teenager of North African descent. Back home, petrol down on Wednesday, diesel up, and the ANC Youth League elects leadership for the first time in 8 years. My name is Roscoe. I'm very happy to be with you here tonight with Benson and with you, Nantle. How are you doing, bro?
No, I'm good. It's always like good to have this podcast right after the weekend, and you feel tackling the week properly. You know, some nice issues and stuff.
I mean, one of the things I've always, the feature of this podcast is this table. And I was just wondering, how the hell did you get this table in through that narrow door?
A lot of people.
Did you helicopter this thing in? Or
there's a lot of people, and we somehow managed it.
Okay. No, cool. Right. So before we get to BENSON NGQENTSU, I want to talk about Shaun August a little bit. Remember, we had Brett Herron 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he made some allegations about Shaun August misusing his enabling allowance when he was a member of the provincial legislature. Just take a look at this clip from then.
And we were alerted to the fact that the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, the Secretary of Parliament and the Finance Department, or the Members Affairs Department, were investigating a claim for Human Rights Day constituency event. Now, we didn't have a Human Rights Day event as a party, but he claimed he claimed entertainment expenses for a Human Rights Day event, and the Western Cape Provincial Parliament informed our office that they're investigating it. And then there was an anonymous tip-off that he also claimed for other events. So when he was at by-elections, he claimed for accommodation and stuff. So there is an investigation being done by the Western Cape Provincial Parliament into his claims and whether they're fraudulent or not. And if they are, then the DA have recruited someone that has committed the same misconduct that they fired, that they used to fire the Speaker of their own party, of the legislature.
The DA have recruited somebody that is being accused of something that they fired the Speaker of Parliament for. Technically, the Speaker of Parliament of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament was fired for defamation or saying things out of line, as most black people tend to discover when they say something wrong about Alan Zille, Ngaba Banga in the Eastern Cape, and the Speaker. You know, they tend to get fired. But be that as it may, this is big now, because the Speaker's office in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament has then confirmed. I think we can pull up that that correspondence that says former member August failed to respond to the WCPP's attempts to obtain the necessary particulars by the relevant due dates. He has since responded. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament has since referred the matters to the South African Police Services for investigation and will fully cooperate with SAPS and will furnish to the SAPS all relevant support and documentation. Now, that's more than an anonymous letter. That's the Parliament referring this matter to SAPS. Now, I've reached out to Shaun August for comment, and he said that he is taking advice. Of course, I'm happy to speak to Shaun to give his side of the story, and we'll wait comment on that. But that is just to follow up on the story that Brett Herron broke on on the show. So I don't want to, I think it's too early for me to comment. This thing is under investigation by SAPs, but it's more than an internal investigation by a political party. It's more than an internal investigation by the provincial legislature. It's now an investigation by the South African police services. Okay, so we're done with that. We can get to the reason why we're all here. Benson, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you, brother.
Good evening, Roscoe, to you and your viewers or your audience, and thanks for having us.
Now, yes. So now, I mean, you're known to be a fiery speaker. I mean, I saw you at speak many times. Most recently at the ANC provincial conference, and you just spat fire from start to finish. Now, over the weekend, the South African Communist Party had a provincial council. And one of the issues that came of it is the assassination of red councillors and people who were communists and socialists. I didn't know that we're still living in the 1960s and 1970s where communists and socialists are targeted for assassination. Why do you think this is?
Well, it is clear that even today, communists continue to be a threat wherever they are found, irrespective of levels. One, there is this tweet by a right-winger, Nicole Barlow, who makes a statement to say, Mantashe, actually they missed an opportunity to assassinate Mantashe. And that statement is made within the context of Minister Mantashe not attending a session where a parliament memorandum, was supposed to be signed, And if you look at the content of what was supposed to be signed and what every communist stands for, you'll appreciate that Mantashe in this instance is targeted on the basis that he is a communist and he stands opposed to all tenets of neoliberalism, including attempts by international capitalist market forces to capture the energy space. You might have observed throughout, they have been targeting him. And we're saying, we can't allow that to happen. And we ought to defend our existence as communists. We ought to defend our comrades who are deployed wherever they are found, who are still committed to the ideals of a socialist South Africa. As I've also indicated, to say, listen, whilst we're at our meeting, one of our comrades, Nomgogo, receives an alert from the municipal authority to say, listen, you need to go for a hiding on the basis that you are in trouble, right?
So during the provincial council,
meeting, yes.
One of the comrades received a death threat.
The death threat. And we said, listen, Nomgogo is targeted on the basis of his fight against corruption, where he lives, what they did in Grabo, he's hardworking. He's not the only one. One of our comrades from Sadala municipality, Comrades Buso Gleba, also was shot more than 14 times. He survived. He was here in Cape Town Hospital for about a month. He had to be in exile for a couple of months. Even as we speak, he has security details. Duka here in Gryfontein and many other comrades, including the former councillor, Comrade Mondengulwa. So, and there are many comrades and there are many leaders who perished on the hands of criminals. And we are posing a question. Isn't because of what we have described as a nexus between the criminal network, some rogue community leaders, elements from the criminal justice cluster, and some lumpen business. And is it not because of the SACP stance against this criminal network? So these are issues which must not be undermined. And what we stand for against this inhuman, barbaric, and violent system, which continue to reproduce the ills we continue to see. So, as the party, I must make the statement that we've now even assembled a team to work on this issue of Nomkoko, right? On this one of Mantashe, the SACP has already opened a case, not only a criminal case with the South African Police Service, and also reported the matter to the Human Rights Commission. This cannot be taken as just as a Mantashe versus Nicole matter, right? It's an attack on our national sovereignty at the level of the police, because if you like, international capitalist market forces, right, are actually dealing with undermining our national sovereignty, and that we must defend.
So there's a pattern of assassination, death threats,
Absolutely.
particularly for communist and left-leaning people. We don't see the same happening for libertarians and liberals and
Not at all.
conservatives.
Not at all. Some years ago, the genocidal on Mapaele was a very deadly genocidal at a time. He survived a bullet at the commemoration of Krizani in Gauteng. Until today, we haven't been advised about progress about even this one of Comrade Mantashe. I don't think our police service or our law enforcement agencies on their current form are capable of dealing with these matters. This one of Nomkoko, the one of Arthur Gwede, and many other culprits. So we have this crisis, of also even law enforcement agencies, whose capacity appears to be what? Collapsing, if you like, if they have not collapsed.
The statement over the weekend says the 1st of July 2023 marked exactly 3 years since the cowardly assassination of Comrade Siya Siswana, the former district secretary of Brian Bunting district, and his young daughter. To date, those who committed this heinous crime are still at large and no arrest has been made. The Siswana family has no closure and is denied justice. This is an indictment on the police's investigation capacity. Coming back to Nicole Barlow's tweet and what it churns up in the deep consciousness of this country. When Chris Hani was assassinated, the country was on the precipice of anarchy. Why do you think that these efforts to destabilize a constitutional democracy still persist within one particular cohort of people?
The first point which I think I must make is that neoliberal forces are emboldened. And that is why Nicole was able to make that statement, right? And two, such will still going to persist simply because there's still some organizations and leaders who are still firm for the total liberation of our people. So it is on those bases that we are going to continue to see these kind of tendencies. And I think I must make this point in respect to the issue of Siya, our late secretary. There are two reasons that till today, those who assassinated our secretary and his daughter are still at large. One, it is because the South African Police Service is infiltrated, right? And some amongst the police, within the police ranks, if you like, are entangled in this criminal network. The second one is that the South African Police Service, as a result of these austerity measures, faces a crisis of lack of capacity. For an example, you still have one investigating officer made to possess about more than 100 murder dockets, right? In such an arrangement, such a police officer won't be effective and won't be efficient to ensure that he or she is able to do thorough investigation, update complainants on a regular basis, visit crime scenes, follow up on the leads. No resources, no cars, no cell phones. Even if some of the state cell phones have no airtimes or data. So that's the state of the police currently in respect to capacity as a result of this neoliberal austerity trajectory, which as a party was saying, this government, if this is a government of the people, by the people, for the people, must abandon, right, the present neoliberal, discredited, right, neoliberal austerity trajectory. It's not in the interest of our people, but it is in the interest of the Western imperialists.
We will talk about austerity and the impact that has on the majority of people in this country later on. But I want to talk about similar assassinations, and you mentioned the entanglement of police in criminal networks. The Abahlali baseMjondolo movement, their leaders are also subject to assassination, and they allege that there's police and political involvement from ANC officials even. What is your stance on political killings of, I would say, fellow socialists and communists who just maybe are not in the SACP?
Those, as the party, we stand in solidarity with the leaders of Abahlali baseMjondolo who are facing intimidation, who are targeted, and who are killed. And we know all those who stand with the people, who fight with and for the people, will always be a threat to those who benefit out of this appalling state of affairs in our country, particularly in working class communities. Because what we know, there are leaders, community leaders by day, right? And the crooks and the criminals by night. That's a challenge we face. That is why as the party, we made this statement, even the ANC conference, to say there ought to be a lifestyle audit of all local leaders within the alliance and beyond the alliance. Because why? There must be a relationship between my lifestyle as Benson, right, with my sources of income. The car I drive, where I live, the clothes I wear, what I drink, etc. Including the lifestyle of, audit the lifestyle of our own spouses. So that is very important. You can't have assets. You can't live a lifestyle. You can't explain how you acquired some of the things, And being a leader must not serve as an entitlement to be the first person to get tenders in a particular community, right? It's to be a CLO or what have you. It can't be. As a leader, you ought to be selfless. Therefore, you must benefit if you have to benefit last. People first, and after people have been served, it is then that you can come in, right? For you to survive, not to be rich. I always say to those who are councillors or deployed in the state, listen, you are not employed, you are deployed. The income you are getting is an allowance for you to move from point A to point B to serve our people, selfless and wholeheartedly. It's not a salary. And that is why when you are dismissed, you can't even approach the CCMA. And those resources, use them to serve our people. Don't use them for your own personal interest, by the way. That must come last to any selfless revolutionary. Unfortunately, revolutionaries are dwindling. That's a challenge we are facing. What we are having is elements who join politics, who join our revolution for self. In fact, that's a debate we must have in the movement. Career politics. Because unlike before, people are no longer joining the movement or the revolution to serve our people, but to serve themselves. And that is why many of, I'm looking at my generation that, these people don't even want to develop themselves. You develop yourself through going to a place called school as basis to serve the people better. And when you are no longer in that position of responsibility, at least you can serve anywhere, meaning you can also be employable.
Yes.
Deployment cannot be, it is life and death simply because some amongst us do not have life beyond serving in the movement. is something we must address, or else we risk perishing. In fact, it should be part of the what? Of the basic tenets of the renewal of our movement.
I see you getting into your flow now, actually, because that's a very nice segue into what I was going to talk about, money in politics. But one thing you mentioned about serving others first, there's a story about Chris Hani, incidentally, that he made sure that those under his command ate first, and then he would eat. And I can also assure people at home that Comrade Benson did not pull up in a Mercedes-Benz SLC. Comrade Benson pulled up in a car befitting a communist and a leader of the people. Let's just leave it at that. So, the
I like
influence.
my polo.
It's nice. It's
like
lekker, man. It's zippy. You can zip through traffic. Yeah. So, at the 9th Provincial Congress of the ANC, held 2 weekends ago, you spoke about the influence of money in politics. I think we have that clip. Let's play that one.
Now, what are therefore these regressive tendencies we must confront here in this conference and emerge differently out of this conference? They include the key, amongst other things, politics of regionalism, sexism, racism, auctioning of delegates through the use of money, where delegates are made commodities, where they are bought and sold to the highest bidder.
Right. So that's one element of the politics of money in politics, just in terms of the buying of delegates at conferences. Can you explain generally to the layperson how that would work? Somebody who's never had any experience of conference politics, how that...
Yeah. Okay. Firstly, there is this thing called National Democratic Revolution. Let me talk about D, meaning democracy. D. D is also applies in the movement, democratization of processes wherein members and leaders are able to participate. Now, so this thing of going to branches, convening meetings, people debate and so on, go to conferences, elect, it's deepening of democracy. Now, it does appear that this new phenomenon, what it describes as a regressive tendency, the use of money, is actually undermining the deepening of democracy. Because those with money determines where the meeting must take place, who must be there, and also determines its outcomes. How? By paying participants. Now, you can just engage with any person, leader at the level, right? As a consequence of this, we are unable to grasp the theory of our revolution on the basis that we have become a rented crowd by those with money to serve them. To serve them. Now, we are saying, no, our conferences should not be auctions, where one will come with 500, 2,000, and so on. That can't happen. We can't allow that. Because that leadership and organization will serve the interests of those with money. And why these elements are buying our membership, are buying our leaders, are buying our organization, it is simply because they want to capture the ANC, right? And use the ANC as a vehicle to get into the state. Use the state to advance their personal and private interest, or pursue what you call private accumulation of wealth. That is a threat to our national democratic revolution we must confront. Sadly, these elements with money, others are beneficiaries of the BE scheme, right? Whilst others have actually, the money they use, they ill-gotten money from the state, stolen money from the state, used for these wrongdoings. It is sad when elements, sadly they are black, unfortunately, right, were able to say so and so in that in that structure is my person, reports to me. That we can't do. We can't allow that to happen. We're eroding the ideals of the NDR, the ideals of the Freedom Charter. Let us renew the movement, right? Let us reconfigure the alliance and deepen democracy, root out the use of money. Linked to this is regionalism. What do I mean by regionalism? And people don't know this thing that, and it is the lack of grasp of the NDR. If you have a grasp of the NDR, you will look at things in this context through the lenses of the colonialism of a special time. What brought us to where we are? It is colonialism of a special time that is responsible to demarcate the world to have Africa, to demarcate Africa and have South Africa, to demarcate South Africa have KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, and so with different tribes and so on. Demarcate South Africa or the Western Cape to have regions. And that in this region, this and that region, and impose conditions, right, for each region. So if then you mobilize yourselves, right, on the basis of regionalism, you are pursuing the legacies of colonialism of a special type and apartheid, and also look at leadership through the lenses of region. That is backwardness. Actually, it's not just regressive, right, but also it is counter-revolutionary, because it is an antithesis of what the National Democratic Revolution stands for in this instance and in the National Democratic Revolution. So these are just ABCs, if you like. What does N stand for? And indeed, explain this in a manner that one understands. The national question, meaning who belongs. And why Roscoe, for example, live in this area? It's not because of his own choosing, right? It was imposed by colonialism of special time. It was imposed by apartheid. And we are not contributing to building this society where we are able to address this racial divide, this regional divide, this tribal divide. In fact, others now are invoking the issue of clans. But like clanship, as this clan, we are in this organization, we are so much, we are occupying this and that. That is backward, and we need to deal with it.
So in the sense that regionalism, I would only ever then interact with or see to people who are like me, because and that would break down the idea of solidarity across the lines of race and other things that the colonialism has divided us into. So look, coming back to the issue of money in politics, how do we, if you had the answer to this, it would be incredible, how do we solve the issue of money in politics, in the ANC, for example?
The challenge we're having is that even national leaders are beneficiaries of this regressive tendency.
Now, what do we do with these
They
national
make it
leaders?
slogans and so on, right? We need to outlaw the use of money and get rid. In fact, the use of money exists on the basis that it is only when one holds a particular position in the ANC that it can be able to get to the state. It is when one is in the state that I can be able to sustain my accumulation of wealth. Because the state, some, are not using the state to serve the people, but to serve themselves. So that's the ANC now is being made an auction. If you go to the middle of the ANC, it's just an auction. Not debates, no politics. Elect us, and if you are elected, it's a vehicle for me to be an MP, to an MP, and so on, or to have an influence in this and that municipality. You know, I don't want us to talk about the investigation by the Hawks on the issue of PPE in some municipalities here in the Western Cape, and who is leading those municipalities. And you begin to connect dots. Who are these elements who are implicated? Whom are they close to at a level of leadership? Who benefited out of this? So these are important connections we must make. You know, as we talk about the issue of state power or building our own organization. So the issue of money is quite critical, and unfortunately, the tentacles of it are quite wider.
Also at the conference, you you gave a very spirited input into factionalism, and you know, like people now know that you have a reputation for just calling it as you see it. So I mean, let's play that clip about factionalism.
We must combat factionalism. Let's face it, comrade. Honestly, let's be brutal. I am a member of the ANC. The period under review has been made with factionalism, where politics within the movement have been either CRized or RETized. CRization and RETization of the body politics of our movement has been a problem, and that is why we are where we are. Let's face it. Yes. There might be some new realignment, but such presented a threat for the renewal of the ANC and the reconfiguration of the alliance, if you like. Let's face it, comrades.
Let's face it, comrades. So you basically bowled the cat. You said, listen, the state of the ANC, at least the state of the ANC in the Western Cape, it's been hobbled by factions and even nationally. So again, I say to you, how do we fix them?
Firstly, you know, the sad thing is that these groupings of factions, they're not about the direction the movement or revolution must take. That's the most unfortunate thing. They're about accumulation. And in the period under review, as I indicated, both the politics of our movement has been made what we termed CRization. And therefore, if you talk about CRization, meaning you're talking about a grouping aligned to, in the late 2017.
A grouping aligned to, when you say CRization, you mean a grouping aligned
there
to
was a
President
grouping,
right,
which called itself Cyril Ramaphosa. And it later renamed itself and called itself RRU, Renewal, Rebuild and Renewal, Rebuild, Renewal and Unity. Now, right, we called it self-styled RRU, you know, because they saw themselves as, or they projected themselves as the sole custodian, right, of renewal, of rebuilding and unity of the ANC. And we look at them and say, okay, who must be renewed, right? All those who are opposed to them, particularly the so-called RET forces, you know, that those are the ones who are corrupt, must be renewed and so on. But when you look at what is it that these forces combined represent, actually they are two sides of the same coin. You know, because they are perpetuating groupings on the basis of getting organization to access to power. Access to power for what? For accumulation, right? They have no interest of the organization, and all of them, you won't find them on the ground on campaigns. They have no interest in political education, convene political school, political council. They will just come for the sake. So they both did not represent our movement. Now, they're quite pragmatic. And of course, realignments came in and so on and so on. And that is why, friends, you might have noticed the decline electoral. That actually, where even elections machineries would be factionalized. Elections machineries would be built on which faction to belong to and so on. That was quite a problem, you see. Because if I coordinate elections, I will have proximity to leaders and possibly have control over resources. And unfortunately, again, undermining the ideas of the NDRD, that there is no accountability. Nobody can be held accountable. One can preside over resources for election of the organization, but that person knows he or she is not going to be accountable, or nobody will hold him or her accountable. So there is beneficiation out of this. And patronage, right, is one of those that if I belong to this and that is strong affection, I'll be beneficiary of patronage. Patronage in the form of either becoming a councillor, MPL, very few perhaps for bureaucrats, you say. In fact, the cake here is shrinking. We don't have a cake, actually. So it's just about those. We have been declining on the basis of that we are selfish. We're not committed to our revolution. We're not committed to our movement. We're not committed to our people. It's on those basis. And that's this one notion of renewal should not about the rhetoric. For example, we made a call, Roscoe, to say, listen, we must have an alliance strategic workshop to focus on elections. We must attend. Content of it should not be dominated by political rhetoric. Meaning, we need to invite experts from different fields to guide, to present scientific research on the trends, inform our strategy. We're not expecting somebody to write us a letter and say, come to an elections workshop, and the same person present thumbsucked data information. No. Right? So, and those experts ought to engage with us, tell us what we don't want to hear, as basis to ensure that we're able to reposition the ANC-headed alliance in the province. Reposition it. And we do have potential and capacity to reposition if we're to unite. Agree on the outcome. Therefore, who should constitute elections machinery at the level of the province, region, etc.? We must coordinate. We must convene. And that, because I'm the Provincial Secretary of the SACP, must not automatically mean that. Therefore, I must either convene or coordinate. Right? We can play a political oversight and ensure that at least people capable of inspiring confidence can to be elected by a number of SACP or ANC members doesn't necessarily mean that therefore you command public support or you have an appeal. No, it does not work that way. You see? So that's one of the calls the SACP were making, and that as an alliance must come down on the ground and campaigning alliance be amongst our people. Take up matters. For example, on Friday, on Thursday, COSATU is taking up a campaign on the rising cost of living. The party will be there, right? On Friday, the party will be picketing outside, UCT, because at UCT, there's a graduation of the Nelson Mandela Fidel Castro Brigade, and hosting, organized by the Department of Health. We're saying, listen, there are 9 provinces here. Only the Western Cape that doesn't benefit out of this program of young students who get deployed to Cuba to become medical doctors. Therefore, the Minister of Health must do anything possible to ensure that they directly select such potential students from the Western Cape. Those are some of the programmatic things which can perhaps, if you like, define what we call, without even getting the subject, reconfiguration of the alliance.
Yes.
Doing things differently, doing things collectively, ensure that there is consensus when we arrive at decisions, right? So,
and people become sort of unintentional victims of factions.
Absolutely.
You could say that I'm in a faction and I'm not actually in a faction, but then I'm tarred with that.
Absolutely.
Whereas opposed to, let's say I have something to offer, I'm immediately sidelined. And then on the flip side of it, with somebody making a political calculation about who's in power, and then disregarding first principles, and then just going with that particular gatekeeper or gatekeepers. Look, I want to get to the meat of what we here to discuss, which is the reconfiguration of the alliance. This is something we've seen the ANC drop to low 50%. And now in the upcoming elections, there's a feeling that the ANC could go under 50%. Is the move to reconfigure the alliance a response to that electoral decline of the ANC?
Okay, let me make this point. The SACP had its 15th National Congress last year. Okay. And at that Congress, the SACP took a decision to contest elections with or without a reconfigured alliance.
So the SACP will contest the 2024 elections?
Took a decision to contest elections with or without a reconfigured alliance. Now, the Central Committee was given the responsibility to say, listen, convene an augmented Central Committee, deal with this question, right? Now, and we convened an augmented Central Committee in March. In that augmented Central Committee, took a decision to say, listen, okay, based on the issues raised by our comrades, and this discussion is a decade-old discussion and beyond, by the way, right? By the way, we will not be contesting for the first time. We contested elections before the ANC, by the way, if you like. Now, we took this in mind and said, listen, our preferable option is to contest elections within a reconfigured alliance headed by the ANC. Now, but there are conditions, and such conditions include: one, there must be strive for common consensus or consensus at arriving at analyzing the state of the working class in the country, the trajectory the country must take. Let's agree. Develop a response to resolving the crisis facing our people of unemployment, of poverty, of inequality. The working class is facing a serious offensive for the working class across sectors of the economy. Workers are being casualized. Workers are being subject to labor brokering. Workers are even today, EPWP is being made a new form of cheap labor. So, and the collective will develop a response, not the treasurer, the ANC, SACP, COSATU. Agree on the question of implementation and monitoring collectively on mechanism. Agree on the processes of selection and election of leaders. Agree on the question of accountability of those deployed in all key sites of power and terrains of struggle. And that communists in the state must have powers and authority to propagate socialist ideas. Communists have been victims of being deployed to positions to pursue neoliberal agenda. For example, Jeff Gwede was once a minister responsible for public enterprises, I think around 1999. Mm-hmm. And as senior leader of the SACP, the Central Committee, he was made to privatize state-owned companies. And we fought with him. And the next conference of the SACP, we removed him. And later realized, no, man, he was acting on the mandate of the ANC,
which is the leader of the alliance.
But this mandate is an antithesis of the ideas of the National Democratic Revolution. That is why we make this statement, Roscoe, to say, actually, the ANC we're working with is not the ANC we're in alliance with. Because the ANC we're in alliance with is working class bias, is committed to the National Democratic Revolution, a program which is neither socialist nor capitalist. But what we know is that it serves the interests of our people. Mm-hmm. So the present trajectory, for example, you go to the energy sector, space. We're quite excited about the posture Comrade Gwede is taking, right? Against what appears as attempt by neoliberals to capture the energy space through the renewables, amongst other things, that we must abandon our coal, the endowment of this country. So And we need that firmness. He will challenge me and say, Benson, come to my department and show me anything liberal here. So we need that firmness. But if indeed they were to have this latitude in parliament of propagating socialist ideas, will be not where we are. We are not saying there are no building blocks for socialism. There are building blocks for socialism as we speak. One of them is that early childhood, social grant, access to education, healthcare, despite the continuous challenge, the continuing persisting challenges, the issue of NSFAS and so on. So those are important building blocks. But again, those are not enough. The relationship between the working class and the sick cannot be about swimming during summer. What about the resources there? Access to land. The majority of people of this country remains landless. The majority of people of this country go to bed hungry. Look at the rate of unemployment in this country. Who is unemployed? So the reconfiguration of the alliance must be able to talk to the agreed economic trajectory. If the ANC is not committed, if the process is currently underway of reconfiguration are not satisfactory, the SACP will be left no option to establish a left popular front as a vehicle to contest elections effectively in 2024. We made this assessment and we said, listen, process towards reconfiguration, yes, there are a struggle, it's moving too slow, and we need to wage a struggle within the SACP, the ANC and COSATU and beyond to ensure the alliance is reconfigured. Because the ANC is where it is on the basis of what appears as social distance between the ANC as an organization and its organs, meaning its alliance partners. That we cannot allow. For example, you get subjected to a situation where a particular leadership is elected through a flawed process, and you are made to kneel before it. And that can't happen. Collectively, we must determine the trajectory this country must take and this revolution. And reconfiguration doesn't mean liquidation of other organs. The ANC will remain independent, the party will remain independent. What will happen, the three organs, right, will coexist, but of course, the ANC will remain a leader head the alliance. At the ballot, you may not see the ANC, but the ANC.
You say that this is a debate that's been going on for 10 years. What has stopped the SACP from contesting? What conditions have stopped the SACP from contesting separately in this last 10 years?
The point that you don't make is that we also agree to say even now, lower structures are given the latitude to write to the PCs and Central Committee on a case-by-case basis to contest by-elections in any municipality. Now, meaning we are ready to contest elections. Now, what we are careful about is to ensure that as liberation forces, we don't lose power. And we're looking at the trends, right, and say, what is going to happen here? And it does appear that coalition government, politics are becoming inevitable. If we score below 40, below 50, what would that mean? Meaning the ANC will have to form alliances with other organizations.
And the SACP would be a passenger in this current configuration.
Absolutely. For example, now, you go to the Central Karoo region, where the ANC is in coalition with BA. And when you look at the relations practically, that actually these supposed technical relations have now been elevated to become strategic relations, to a point that there's no consultation on matters within the alliance, right? The ANC decides and go and engage its coalition partners. And that must come to an end, right? I'm aware that some are running around engaging on possibilities of coalition government in Witzenberg, engaging good in other organizations. And they haven't engaged with us. And such must come to an end. COSATU and the party must be consulted, not for the sake. They must be consulted, and there must be engagement on good faith. So this matter is a serious matter within the party. It's a serious matter within the alliance. I understand that others don't take it serious. But what we appreciate, though, is that at least now it is on the agenda of the ANC and NSC. What we appreciate is that also that this matter is now on the lips of the ANC leaders, and we are appreciating that. Let us roll it out even at a sub-national level, in the province and the regions. In 2021, for example, there were some building blocks, I must confess, towards this reconfiguration, for the first time, where an SACP, a COSATU or SANCO structure will take its membership or print out and participate in an ANC process. Was given that legal responsibility to participate. That never happened. So for me, that was one important building block. We must build many more blocks, not only at a level of deployment, but at a level of policy. At a level of policy. Policy formulation, policy evaluation and monitoring, and also deployment of best cadres to serve our people. So those, among other things, the basic tenets of the reconfiguration of the alliance. Because this alliance is informed by, of course, what we call the common program of our common program, the National Democratic Revolution, whose strategic objective is that of liberation of black people in general and Africans in particular from the bondages of centuries and decades of colonialism, especially and apartheid. So we are, and that the ANC assumed the responsibility to head the NDR. It was amongst that in the basis that the national question was and continues to be the dominant struggle. Meaning, the oppression of the majority people of our country on the basis of their nationality. Whilst the class question, right, became or continues to be a fundamental question. So these interrelated contradictions informed the formulation or the hierarchy in the alliance. It's not about which struggle is primary, which struggle is secondary. They are interrelated. And thus, in pursuance of the national question, we must ensure that there is class content. In pursuing the class struggle, there must be national content. Same as the gender struggle. There must be both the class and the national content. So this alliance is founded around that particular theory. Not merely now on deployment. Deployment now is about advancing. And deployment, we must deploy capable cadres who are grounded in the theory of our revolution.
I think that the SACP should contest national elections, simply because of the fact that if you do the calculus, just the pure raw number calculation of what could be an outcome, if the ANC gets say 47-48%, if the SACP contests separate from the ANC, they could get 4 or 5%, which means that the alliance is still in power. If you look at say a potential, everyone talks about this alliance potentially between the ANC and the EFF. What the EFF have managed to demonstrate is the ability to extract maximum value out of coalition. So we may, without the SACP contesting nationally, you may end up with a situation where Julius Malema is able to extract from the ANC deputy president. Would the SACP contesting nationally have be able to then make its own broad left alliances, sort of a non-sectarian broad left alliance, to then bring into the governing a governing alliance in 2024? I'm asking you very
the policy of the SACP as a stand is that the party would contest elections within a reconfigured alliance headed by the ANC. But if the process currently underway is not at our satisfactory, right? We have no choice but to contest elections differently.
Which
right? And as others may have been arguing to say, for example, the provincial chair of the ANC in the Eastern Cape, he made a statement to say, listen, it is better for the SACP to contest so that we can enter into coalition with the forces we know than forces we do not know. Forces whom we share ideology with, than forces we do not know. So that's a very important debate. And now we are engaging with the ANC. We are not asking for permission from the ANC to contest, not to contest. We are not going to be appeased by positions that Benson this and that. Unfortunately, right, as the provincial secretary once I'm the provincial secretary of the SACP, I don't think I must go to the legislature. I must serve the people outside unless the SACP contest. Because our people do require an undiluted voice.
That's undiluted is, I think, a good word because, the SACP has come out against load shedding, against corruption. These statements have been oppositional in nature because, the working class suffer the most from the economic precarity, load shedding, all of these ills that I think the ANC in many ways has to own. But in many, it's diluted in the sense that it comes from... I would say an SACP but there is a perception of that would kowtow to whatever the ANC says. I think that there's definitely a constituency there that would vote for the SACP, even knowing that they would be in alliance with the SACP, but then they would be able to bring a full moral and political force to bear on the ruling party.
As I indicated, out of this guns we said, we must wage the struggle for the reconfiguration and renewal must be waged also within the SACP, in the ANC, and as basis to ensure that we are able to assert the political and ideological authority of the SACP. And you can't have a party, Benson, let's say Benson, the Minister of Finance, and on issues of fiscal policy and so on, the party becomes mute because if comrades speak up against Treasurer, it will be seen as an attack on Benson. That must deal with such issues. Meaning, let us assert the independence of the SACP. And it must not in any way seem diluted on the basis of our alliance with the ruling ANC. And we must be the first ones to critique the ANC. Deal with the blind spot of the ANC before our opponents and enemies, right, realizes those blind spots. Unfortunately, liberals assume the position that when we are critical of the ANC, we are either obsessed or anti-ANC. Yet, we are engaging with the ANC constructively within and outside as basis to reshape it. In areas, for example, where we are strong as a party, the ANC is better. In areas where we are weak, the ANC is terrible or does not even exist. That's the challenge we are having. And there is a struggle. It's a struggle within the party. Certainly, there are forces. Because, look, if you look at former colonial countries, right, liberation movement, post-liberation, embraced neoliberalism, and that is informed simply because of the collapse of the Soviet bloc in the late 80s. And neoliberal forces did not only infiltrate national liberation movements, they also infiltrated or continued to infiltrate even forces or organs or alliances of this national liberation movement, be it trade unions and their leadership or communist parties. So the party itself is not going to be immune from contests by neoliberal forces, international and local, through their proxies. So the direction the movement is taking is as a result of this contestation. But there is the contested terrain, and the challenge it faces, we are also going to be infected or affected. So that's the issue.
What is the next steps in this reconfiguration? I'm saying, when will we know if and when the SACP will be on the ballot for the 2024 elections, potentially?
Yesterday, on Saturday, there was a ballot race between the ANC between the ANC and the Communist Party. We are yet to be informed about the outcomes. Leave the statement issued, we're deeply interested as to what came out of that. I know it's not for the every time when in the lead up to elections, ANC leaders will always project themselves as pro-reconfiguration, as pro-interest of the working class, as pro-interest of the alliance, and so on and so on, as basis to pacify us leading up the elections. And post-elections, organs of the alliance get abandoned. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that now, you pass the leader of the ANC calls back. You just call him, one missed call, he calls back. And after elections, that is not going to happen. And a situation where organs of the alliance are used as conveyor belts for elections must come to an end. But also, leaders of organs of the alliance must be assertive, must be firm, must be resolute. They must not take positions based on momentary irritations or comforts. So, such has been our weakness within the movement in the past years. And I have no doubt in my mind that the reconfiguration will be at the satisfactory of all organs of the alliance. And I have no doubt in my mind that should we indeed commit, all of us collectively at all levels, the ANC headed alliance will receive votes more than 54%. I have no doubt about it. I have no doubt in my mind here that even here in the province, we are going collectively, we have the capacity and potential to reposition the alliance at the best placed organizations to lead our people. The Democratic Alliance is no option for our people. The neo-fascist, the fascist, EFF is no option for our people. So the ANC remains that option, but it should cleanse itself first. It should reconsider. It should take its alliance organs serious. But alliance organs should not talk about this reconfiguration or that the alliance must work together for selfish interest. Meaning, it must not be driven by personalities to serve their personal interest. If I'm vocal on this matter, for me to go to parliament, then there is a problem with me. And that will dent the alliance. I have no doubt in my mind that we can tilt the balance of force. The DA is facing its own challenges.
Yes.
Right? Of corruption, of infightings. Actually, there is evidence, as one of its members have been dismissed, that actually it is entangled in this criminal network. Entangled in corruption. Right?
Oh,
its
which
leaders
one? There are plenty of them.
Its leaders are accused of serious offenses, including sexual harassment. There was a picketing in Mossel Bay last week, where one of the officials was accused of harassing a woman. Here in the legislature, one MEC was dismissed for sexual harassment. Here in the city of Cape Town, one MMC was dismissed on the basis of links with corrupt elements with the criminal network. And there are many more who are still going to come out. So not everything is well, but what we need is the unit of the ANC, the unit of the alliance, to be able to push and actually not to be obsessed with the ANC, but ours must be obsessed with our people. I hear others saying, no, we are going to bring the DA below 40%. That should not be our preoccupation. Our preoccupation should be to demonstrate our commitment, loyalty, and love for the people. Yes. It is only when our people realizes that indeed we are committed, we love them, that they can be able to vote for us. If we don't demonstrate that, demonstrate ethical leadership, that we embrace all race or all social groups in society and here in the Western Cape. We visit all corners, and we must not be an ANC or an alliance of one corner. It is only then that we can be able to reposition and, or if you like, and tilt the balance of forces in favor of the liberation forces.
So here in the Western Cape, I'm going to, you mentioned something about all races. We have there's I would say, a distance between black and colored people in the Western Cape, and these are working class people who are sort of separated. How do we build bridges between these communities and make them realize that working class people are being screwed equally regardless of race and where they stay? Everyone's being pauperized.
It confirms the persisting legacy of apartheid and colonialism. And unfortunately, ourselves must face it. There's something called intellectual humility. It is when you appreciate mistakes, confirm, but be ready also to confront them. The challenge we are facing in the Western Cape is two strands. And these strands are found even in our organization, what we call African chauvinism, narrow African chauvinism, and narrow colored chauvinism. Now, they can only be confronted if ourselves as leaders, we can be able to reach out, engage on popular mass education, so that our people can be able to appreciate the existence of the current setups. The divide between culture and Mitchell's Plain is still intact, still there. The divide between Pinelands and Langa. If you go from Langa to Pinelands, you take a taxi to Athlone. So such are responsible for the present state of affairs.
There's the perception that black people are benefiting disproportionately from the ANC-led government at the expense of colored people. How do you combat those perceptions? I mean, mass education is one thing, but it's something that's so deeply ingrained that building some kind of social cohesion is in the Western Cape is almost it's a very difficult task.
That perception is also, if you look at the composition of cabinet, and a person from Mitchell's Plain will say, okay, who are the members? Who is this in cabinet? And they find it difficult to relate with many of them. People from Mitchell's Plain, they find it difficult to relate. After Trevor Manuel, where else? But Trevor Manuel and out and so on. So it's Patricia Dillon. And Patricia Dillon is not part of the liberation forces. So the outlook do contribute or do reinforce this narrative. Now, and it's not, this narrative is not only advanced by the poor, even the middle class from both sections do advance this narrative. So it's an issue which I think is it's an unresolved national question. It's an unresolved national question, nation building. And it requires all of us to commit on bridging, on dealing with this divide. You see? So it's not an easy question to respond to, but it's a matter. For example, you have Benson. Can Benson, the leader of the party, speak Afrikaans? Right? That Benson can speak Afrikaans not of his own choosing. it is on the basis of where he was born, how he was socialized. But what is it that we are doing to deal with that? But what I know, I can assure you, is that my kids, my daughter and my son can speak Afrikaans. You get the point?
Yes.
So we need to responding to it ought to be programmatic. Ought to be programmatic. Do I have an appeal in Mitchell's Plain? Next month we are commemorating the 40th anniversary of UDF, and certainly it's going to be commemorated there. We will be commemorating it. And veterans from the colored working class, right, have disengaged from the movement. They've disengaged. Others were pushed. Others felt that now. So these are important issues, and the present leadership has no appreciation of these important forces.
When you say the present leadership, you mean
ourselves?
Okay.
Yeah, ourselves, right? We don't appreciate the significance of appealing and ensure that the interest of this section and this section feels part of the movement, part of the party. I always argue and say, I have a problem with what appears as Pan-Africanization of our organization. The party, the ANC and the federation, can't be like a party or a federation ANC somewhere in Limpopo or KZN. It ought to be reflective of the realities of the Western Cape.
You mean in terms of representativity in the leadership?
Absolutely. Yeah.
When you say programmatic, you mean initiating projects that are in the communities that speak to a common working class experience of black and...
Absolutely.
Do we have any of those programs
Well, there are such programs. There are such programs initiated by national government in particular. But it does appear that those programs, if you like, are just touching lives kind of programs, which are not necessarily sustained. That's the issue.
Do you think that the SACP is sort of being unshackled from the ANC-led alliance in the sense that there are constraints that you would be able to, in the process of campaigning, be able to exert a freer hand in implementing these programs in the Western Cape, in Cape Town, to drive social cohesion?
If you like, such programs, by the way, is one of the challenges we had post the 1994 democratic breakthrough, right, was to surrender political program to the state. For example, we're no longer celebrating Freedom Day politically. It's celebrated by the state, etc. And that is part of the demobilization of our structures and our organization we must attend to. And it's not true to say the colored working class is not organized. It is organized in churches.
Yes.
It is organized in gangs. You can't say it's not. It is organized in gangs. It is organized in sport. Different codes of sport.
It is organized in a political vacuum.
In a political vacuum, it is organized. You go to workplaces, for example. Fortunately, I'm a trade unionist, and it depends there as to if the first conduct is a colored person, the rest are sure that the rest will join. But if the first conduct is a should I say an African person, the colored section the colored will be reluctant. Same as the black, the Africans will be reluctant if the first person to initiate a union, right? And the labor movement, for example, the only trade union which is still reflective of the Western Cape and is non-racial organic is SACP, the textile. Textile. That one is organic on the basis that workers are members of the union from the plant level. If you look at other unions, right? There are unions now built on the grounds of race. You go to institutions of higher learning such as CPUT, for example. Though they don't say it, but when you look at it, this union now is posturing, is made to posture as a union for Africans. I forgot the other union. There's another union, for the middle class, for the lecturers, for example.
Yes.
Dominated by the colored section. So these are the matters which requires leadership to engage so that workers can be able to appreciate that a trade union is an organization of the workers irrespective of color or of race, of nationality, and of gender.
Okay. Nantel, you had an input?
Yeah, so you just spoke about it now, and I'm reminded of something that I saw on, I think it was TikTok. So this person is saying, and I hope I'm not butchering it, but the problem comes in where the national government, or all government of South Africa, made a distinction between colored and African. And that is the problem right there, because when we continue to do it, because I do it sometimes, you just said now colored and African, right? You as well. So I'm not blaming the individuals. I think collectively we as South African has made a hell of a mistake, because the minute we say African or colored, we are dividing, because coloreds are African. They cannot save us ever. It is we are colored. We are African.
Africans.
And when especially in the jobs surroundings, the minute you separate the two, you are actually we collectively are just perpetuating what the apartheid government did, man. And until there's no distinction where one or the other,
or political distinction,
yes, or nationality, because it feels like the government itself, irrespective of ANC or DA, whatever, is already saying that you are separate. But why can't I be African? I'm born here.
You are African.
You know what I'm saying? So I think we as collectively, and I'm saying this to the ANC, I'm saying this to the DA, I'm saying this to everybody now. Until we separate that African and coloredness and start uniting that two terms, there will continuously be a division, and we can do the integration in the Western Cape, but until that mindset isn't changed, where you feel that, oh, I'm colored, I'm not African. No, there obviously will be a division, whatever, but as long as you can say the white person, he is African, the colored person, he is African, the black African is African. You know what I'm saying? And I think when our second president,
Thabo
Mbeki said, I am African, the African Renaissance, no? Yeah. So I think that had to include colored people, but I think it did, but it didn't get to the ground level, to the colored people and in general, man. And
also, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, you made a point about, somebody owns a factory. They're going to basically, they hold the whip hand of capital. So black and colored people in the Western Cape or wherever, they're being pauperized at exactly the same rate. And that speaks to sort of how do you conscientize about the class struggle across the lines of race. And I think that's where the SACP can fill a void that currently exists that no other political party can.
Again, I made this point when I talk about unresolved national question. Identity politics is continuing to be a complex question. And you go to workplaces, and capital is responsible for fragmenting our people. Because today in workplaces, workers get started on the basis that you're a foreign national because you're from Zimbabwe, and that local workers don't want to talk to that worker because this worker is from Zimbabwe, right? And again, the same local workers are also divided on the basis of the skin of their color, the question you're posing, right? So those continues to be the unresolved national question. Who belongs? How should you respond to this particular question? And who benefit out of this? Is big business. It's big business. You go to one of the firms. There's a firm in Bredasdorp. This company, when I get into it, man, workers' wages, there are disparities, and those disparities are on a basis of color.
In the sense that these workers are being paid, the workers doing the same job, but they're being paid differently based on the color of their skin.
Even positions, right? white, so-called, okay, let me use that word, so-called colored, so-called Africans, right? The salaries they earn, the wages they earn is not the same. Whereas in respect to gender, women, and when you look at their wage scale, women on the lowest earning, right? The so-called Africans, they follow, right? After them, the so-called colors and the so-called white worker doing the same job. No, not in other countries. I didn't read this in the book, in the company just here, Bredasdorp. Mine company. I said, right? I do them on strike. And the strike, employer divided that strike on the basis of color. Again. You go to Ceres now. You go to Cetrastar. When you get there, workers are divided on the basis of nationality. And that locals are displaced by so-called foreign nationals. And foreign nationals are made cheap labor. So these are issues which the party, should be seized with, and it is seized with, by the way, using legal means and using our mass strength as a party, responding to them, to ensure that at least we're able to build a united society, and where the workers and the poor don't look at it either through the color of their skin or the nationality. Who said today that after 94, unions can no longer organize workers from Lesotho, workers from Zimbabwe? Majority of foreign nationals are not unionized, and that is why they are made cheaply. Actually, neoliberalism, right, has stratified workers, to be in two forms. One, core workers. In this core, they are so-called permanent and precarious section of the workers. Precarious sections include the labor brokers, casual workers, LDCs, contract workers, including EPWP. And EPWP is to use as a new form of cheap labor, facilitated by the state. EPWP was meant for the reproduction of skills. How can you have a person claiming to be on an EPWP for 5 years?
Let's talk about EPWP, because you coined the term EPWPization of the economy, in fact. So, you go around the community and people, especially nowadays with everybody, a permanent job is like finding a bar of gold. That thing doesn't exist anymore. So then this thing called EPWP came on board, Expanded Public Works Program, where people would be employed on a temporary basis to conduct public works, pick up the litter, whatever the case may be. So how is something that's conceived as helping the working class being turned around to play into the hands of capital?
Okay, let's do this. Let me challenge you. Go to any construction site. When you get to that site, you are going to see a crane of a reputable company. When you get there, the mass arm of workers, right? When you get, you will appreciate that only 5 or 3 workers who are permanently employed. And largely you'll find that they are operators, crane operators and so on. The rest is labor brokers, and you'll see them wearing orange overalls. Are they orange? I'm blind in colors, right? Is what is EPWP is. EPWP. And you look at the conditions of employment of all these workers, that actually EPWPs are the worst earnings workers, and throughout. And the number of them surpasses the number of co-workers and the rest of the section of the workers. This precarious section of the workers do not have social benefits, such as maternity leave, such as leave, such as a pension, etc. When that person, for example, and is underpaid, and when that person is sick, he or she goes to a clinic. At a clinic in present form, that person is made to spend a whole day and lose a day wage. Or if the person and said, look, when he goes back to work, he said, no. Our employer would say, I'm not recognizing this notice from the clinic. Go to the doctor. And that is why poor workers go and queue at a particular doctor and buy what is called a medical certificate. To a point that now there are bogus people who stand on the street to sell medical certificates. And when employers verify them, it turns out that those doctors are bogus and the worker loses job, his or her job. So capital is responsible for the present fragmentation of the workers and the poor across. As a consequence of that, today, let's face it, right? An injury to a co-worker is an opportunity casual worker. Right? Let me say this here, right? Also, an injury to a worker of a particular color, right, is a solidarity to a worker of a particular color or nationality. The unfinished or the incomplete national question, building of the nation building project, right, was still far from completing that particular chain. The solidarity amongst us, the workers, is dwindling. You know, when you see a white person in the township is a tourist. When you see a black person in a suburb here in Newlands or Pinelands, is a suspicious black or colored person.
And he's on the neighborhood watch groups immediately.
That's a reality. And the ATD or the police would be activated. You get the point? If you had to drive this pole of mine, right, and drive around Rondebosch, the police or ATD will be activated. You get the point? So that's the kind of society we are living in. And where we stand as the SACP, socialism is possible in this country. A human, a just society, you know, where access to healthcare is not a commodity. Access to quality education is not commodified. Where there will be job for the jobless. Where the workers and the poor have access and share the wealth of this country. Such a society is possible. As things stand, the present society serves the interest of the ruling class, big capital. And collectively, we ought to build this consciousness among our people that it is only when we can unite and confront the present regime that we can address the issue of inequality, of poverty, of unemployment.
When you say the present regime, you mean the ANC?
The present neoliberal trajectory as pursued by both the national and provincial government.
I see.
If you like.
Then isn't it incumbent on
and
the
they were
SACP?
making a statement that there must be a difference between a government led by the revolutionary organizations such as the ANC and a government led by the neoliberal DA. It cannot be correct that when one can even make a statement to say maybe the two are two sides of the same coin. They're just different rhetoric. So the ANC must abandon the neoliberal economic trajectory. By the way, we are where we are in respect to doubting whether winning or not winning because of it. As the last point, history, that marks, history repeats itself. First, as a tragedy, and second, as a farce. In 1923, at the Rand Revolt strike, what mine workers could not get at the bargaining, right, got it through on the ballot, as they did not vote for the then government, and that's the coalition government in 1924. We started to be in coalition in municipalities on the basis of trust deficit between the working class and the ruling ANC. Trust deficit is on the basis of what appears as a non-committal organization to serving our people. So, I am concerned about how the public sector workers see the state, the ANC government. I am concerned about how other sectors of society, for example, we can look at across sectors of the economy. Workers received not more than 7%. Terribly far below. Salaries and wages of the workers are stagnant. yet the cost of living is rising. And today, workers can no longer afford basic necessities. And it is not because we are bewitched, it is on the basis of the policy choices we've consciously made or pursuing. And that must come to an end. Abandon them, right? And so that you can be able to inspire the confidence of the majority people of this country. Do not undermine. Actually, neoliberal is about cutting. Neoliberal austerity is about cutting of social benefits.
Let's talk about austerity.
And IMF, World Bank, and OECD believes that spending money on wages, on education, and regular spending, actually, spending resources on education is not social, it's economic spending. Because you are producing, education is a production of skills for the economy.
So we are currently in a regime of austerity. Austerity means cutting social services, cutting cutting everything that could possibly be cut from the fiscus and from the budget. So what are the services that are being cut, and what is the impact that that's having on society? You already mentioned that the police services are being compromised because of austerity. What are the other things that are suffering because of austerity?
Roscoe, neoliberals have three coercive austerity strategies: fiscal, monetary, and industrial. Right? Industrial. Now, fiscal austerity largely is about cutting budgets. You go to education, budget, there are cuts. You go to health. And that is why today, wake up tomorrow, go to any working class clinic. At 5 o'clock, you're going to see a mother or any person chewing. Because there's insufficient staff and so on. That's the impact. No infrastructure. Just the hospital was demolished. Till today has not been built in Kliffontein. So you go to take the case of Department of Labor. Workers, it takes time for cases to be resolved on a basis due to this cutting of budgets. Contracts of part-time commissioners were terminated, and that made it that now continues to make it difficult for CCMA to process matters on speed. Because of this, there are not sufficient inspectors to visit farms in many other areas and be effective even there. Go to the police, and that is why the police today, as we speak, one constable carries more than 100 dockets. And yet that person is expected to be productive. So go to monetary policy, which talk to the issue of the interest rates and so on. That we are in this crisis of rising cost of living because of such. For example, in the industrial austerity, building of industrial peace. In fact, that's what is weakening. The issue of wages was. Industrial austerity is about wage restraint, right? Collapse the labor collective bargaining, undermine agreed, into a point, by the way, through legal means, what? Disarming the working class to ensure that they are unable to march, to picket, to go on strike. Even in the past decades or so, I haven't seen what is called solidarity strike. You won't see, because industrial austerity forces are on the offensive. And one of the strategies they use is also co-option of trade unionists and trade unions. Deployment of trade unions to boards was about deepening democracy, that no decision must be taken in this and that entity without the workers in the form of their leaders. Little did we know that actually that is leading to co-option to serve the interests of bosses than the interests of the workers. Look at the state of the labor movement across former colonial countries. They're fragmented, divided, characterized by tension and ultimate ruptures. If you like, if you want a quick business, establish your own union. It has become clear that forming a union is a new form of business. That's why we talk about business unionism. That trade unionists are entangled in business dealings. I am not suggesting that we are not immune. I have not doubt my mind that even communist parties and their leaders are co-opted to be champions and defenders of neoliberal policies here in South Africa and elsewhere. You get the point?
Yes.
That is why we ought to wage the struggle within the Communist Party as well for an independent, militant, and fighting SACP of the workers and the poor.
Some would
rebuild
say,
COSATU and continue to build and address this, what I call proliferation of trade unions in workplaces and in the country. It does not serve the interest of the workers. It serves the interest of big business. So we are in trouble, right? The many gains we have scored are facing reversal on the basis of the present trajectory, on the basis of the present leaders who are co-opted to a gravy train, of luxurious life. By the way, there is serious social distance, between leaders and their constituencies. To a point that those we lead find it difficult to relate with ourselves as leaders.
Some would say that there just simply isn't the room there isn't the money to do anything other than reform and conduct austerity. I mean, we've basically been living under some form of austerity, I would argue, since 1996. Where will we find the money? I mean, the arguments are that there will be hyperinflation unless we cut the public sector wage bill, unless we make budget cuts, unless we do what the Reserve Bank says. So what is your counter argument to these? Because remember, these are economists. These are
those are the prescripts of IMF, World Bank, and OECD countries. And that don't have money. Cut on this, cut is. Let me be simple. In the corner of South Africa, without getting into much details, we are told that the public sector is bloated, cut the wage bill and so on. And they look at the ordinary workers. But what I know is that there's going to be shortage of public service workers. That's what I know. Now, if you talk about cutting of unnecessary expenditure, why shouldn't you consider cutting on some of the unnecessary benefits for the elite leadership, such as bodyguards? If I were to, tomorrow, let's say I get appointed tomorrow, I'll be collected at my place by a BMW X7, 2 bodyguards. Suddenly, I must be bodyguarded against 2. That becomes an unnecessary thing. Perhaps you may say, okay, 1 driver for people so that one can relax and so on. The kind of cars our comrades are made to drive, the allowances they have, places where one live, it's not out of here yet that person is getting that big salary. I don't get it. How can we have a state house in Cape Town, a state house in Pretoria? We still fly you for free. You have a car, not only yourself, but including your family. Yet the poor worker can't have that, even your own PA. So these are issues which I think at times we need to get into. But at a strategic level, we ought to abandon this obsession with the Western influence in respect to the economic trajectory and look at other options. Why can't you go and explore how Vietnam is working? in other countries, for instance, socialist countries.
What's the Vietnamese example?
You know, I may not get into the details, but those are the countries. How often do we get our comrades going to Vietnam, study tour, what have you, consider their approach in respect to economic trajectory? You know, because the present one is not helping. You see, so these are and such will need a trajectory which has socialist orientation, a trajectory with no profit maximization, a trajectory to serve the people, to serve the majority people, not a trajectory to serve individuals. So that's the kind of trajectory we need. And such a trajectory is a socialist South Africa. So that's the only solution.
That would mean more of a central planned economy.
Absolutely.
And having certain sectors be put under more state control, if not nationalized outright. What are those strategic sectors that we would have to look at?
Transnet. Transnet is key for the economy of this country, right? And as we speak, they want to privatize. They are privatizing, Transnet, parts of Transnet. They are saying they're non-essential, parts of Transnet. SAA, the stake we own at SAA. How can a state have minority stake?
But isn't SAA just a over-bloated whale that has been mismanaged to the point where for the state to carry an enterprise like SAA, it's just becoming a little bit, it's a heavy lift.
SAA, when you look at SAA, you must look at a sector called aviation. You know, we must approach it through the lenses of the aviation economy. And you begin to appreciate the value of SAA. You see. And you go to Denel. Why must we privatize Denel?
No, we must not privatize Denel.
Now, why must we privatize? By the way, elements want even PRASA to be privatized. Why must we privatize PRASA? Because if we are committed to a developmental state which is socialistic in character, state-owned companies and entities are a big boom. In crisis of this kind post-COVID, SOEs were meant to intervene, to driving the resuscitation of the economy. But because we are actually, it's an understatement, we are controlled by Bretton Woods institutions, such as the IMF, we are made to privatize them. Actually, our national sovereignty actually have been auctioned. IMF, the World Bank, are the one who determines who must be the Minister of Finance, who must be the chair of what board.
So you're saying there is interference from foreign governments to determine our internal agenda in as far as even appointing ministers and
Bretton Woods
functionaries.
Institutions have an influence on the trajectory of our economy. Bretton Woods institutions have an influence and who must lead what board. Who must be the Minister of Finance, who must be the Minister of Public Enterprises, who must be the Minister of Energy. By the way, right, I say this without fear of contradiction, that neoliberal forces are all out that the current Minister of Minerals and Energy, that he be removed, because he's an obstacle.
We talk about Minister Mantashe.
Yeah, I have no doubt in my mind
that there is an order has gone out that he be removed from his position.
I have no doubt in my mind that neoliberal forces and their proxies local are working very hard. I would not be surprised after elections if that ministry is unbundled. You know, is to serve the interest of big capital. International market capitalist forces are emboldened. And they would not be this strong, present and strong, if some amongst us were not complicit. That is why Nicole Barlow was able to make that statement. That is why the Secretary of the U.S., Treasurer of the U.S., was here in South Africa and is able to do anything he wants to do. That is why, even the ambassador of the U.S. is able to say and do anything in our country on the basis that they have their friends in charge. Who are these friends? They must be exposed and isolated in defense of our national sovereignty. We have fought for the sovereignty of this country. The most important part of sovereignty is sovereignty at the level of the economy. That's where it matters. That's where it matters.
So then let's talk about geopolitics in closing, because also in the statement of the weekend was the hybrid, it's titled The Hybrid Proximal War Between the West and Russia. And it goes, in considering the international situation, the Provincial Council recalled Gramsci's poignant observation, which says, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time for monsters. I thought that was a brilliant summing up of the situation in Ukraine and Russia. What is the SACP's view about that conflict, particularly when it comes to issues of sovereignty in the context of what the US ambassador said about South Africa and that ship and the arms and that current mess?
Maybe one sentence or two. That proxy war, the intention is to deal with the national sovereignty of Russia, right? And that war is not only targeting Russia, it's targeting China. Allow Putin to be defeated by these imperialists, and you see them, they'll go to Russia running. By the way, that tension already exists. And that is why we took a decision to say, listen, we're going to stage a picketing on the eve of BRICS here in the Western Cape with the ANC and COSATU, right? Saying hands off Putin. Putin may have his own local problems, but in respect to international politics, he's our force. And that Putin must be, and Putin is not going to be arrested here in South Africa.
Alan Winde says he's going to.
Putin is not going to be arrested here, even if he comes to Cape Town.
But we have 1,000 LEAP officers, Benson.
Those ones are playing, And we want to use this platform in this BRICS moment to intensify our campaign for the lifting of the Cuban blockade and the liberation of the people of Palestine. And the US is responsible for the present situation, for the current happenings in Palestine, and for the present economic blockade in Cuba. That blockade must be lifted. The people of Cuba must be allowed to trade with any country of their choice and to live their own life and not to be told by the US. And South Africa ought to be decisive in respect to this particular question. And BRICS need to emerge. They need to come out of that BRICS clear about the economic blockade in Landoga, in Cuba, as well as the liberation of our people in Palestine. So those two are, and many others, including, by the way, here in the African continent, the current happening in Swaziland. So these are important questions. Important programs the party in the province with the alliance, or with its organs of the alliance, will take up in the lead up to BRICS. Because we must have our own mass-related local BRICS as basis to instill fear on our opponents and inspire our people and let our people understand what the meaning of this proxy war to them and how do they relate with it. And defeating and the importance of the multipolar. What will that mean as the US feel threatened? And what the US represent? And how does it affect a poor woman in Khayelitsha, in Mitchells Plain, in Bothaville, etc.? Because we should not talk about geopolitics in abstract. We must talk about them in a manner that are understandable by a layman person. That will help us a great deal. Thanks.
Personally, for me, that's why the Gramsci quote is poignant for me, because now is the time for monsters. Now, I'm not saying I'm not making the inference that any individual or any state is a monster, but Putin was never a communist. He was never in the Communist Party, to my knowledge. I speak under correction. And also, like, I understand that the multipolar world is not, this is my opinion, purely. It's not about reorienting us towards another bloc, away from Europe and America, the Northern Atlantic powers. It's more about charting Africa's path. So we can't replace like one imperial force with another. That's at least China are willing to listen to us when we say, look, we don't want we want X amount of local labor. We want benefication to take place in Africa, etc., etc.
The content and form of the BRICS bloc will remain a condensatory. Will remain a condensatory. So, of course, forces there have different interests, represent different interests. But presently, the struggle continues. Presently, our immediate threat, right, is Western imperialist aggression. And all those who agrees with us in the fight against Western imperial aggression are our comrades.
Benson, thank you so much for coming here today.
It's a pleasure.
We could talk for hours more, but I think that's all. Yeah, no, we're all good to go. Yeah. So thanks for coming today, Nantle. Thanks for being around.
Thanks for the liquor chat. It was a nice podcast. It's one of those that I need to watch again to get all the gems.
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm gonna watch it when I get home. So you have to only live through this for once. I have to live through it again and again. So I'm gonna. It's BENSON NGQENTSU night at my house, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
But thanks for coming, and we are on next Monday again. And I'll see you then.